Welcome, lunchtime learners. It's always wonderful to see everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. So before I make a couple of little announcements, I just want to mention if you have questions for our speaker, please use the chat feature to put them in during the program, and we will try to get to all of them at the end. But in the meantime, I just wanted to let you know, in case you haven't heard, the city of Scottsdale has put out a heat advisory for the next few days. So you guys know the drill, be prepared, but maybe also be prepared to help some of our guests that are not as aware of what the heat can do to you, and maybe even take a minute to review the protocol on heat stroke and heat exhaustion. So that's the first time we have to talk about this season. And coming up on Monday, April 4th, 4 o'clock, Stewart Awards Recognition Dinner at the Homestead. Sign up is available on Better Impact. It's almost full, so if you hope to go, please jump on and make your reservation. There also will be a live stream option for those who are not able to join us in person. The link is already on our homepage, and the live streaming of the program will begin at 6. Now, for this summer, our Lunch and Learn lineup will be the third Thursday of the month from June to September. It's all on Better Impact. We have a really, I think, unique schedule of speakers and topics. So please take a look and register. And I'm going to take a moment to kind of elicit your help, because we're getting ready to go and plan our fall and winter program. So if you have any topics you'd like to hear or recommend, or any speakers you'd love to recommend, I'd love to hear about it at Stewart Events, which is my email. So all that being said, 'tis the season. I had a walk on the south end of Granite Mountain this morning, and it was spectacular. I felt like there were just bouquets of wildflowers waiting to welcome me. I don't know if any bride has had a prettier aisle to walk down. So I am eager to hear from our speaker, Steve Jones, to hear more detail about exactly what I saw. Just to let you know too, Steve is going to be leading a wildflower hike. If you've never had the opportunity to be in the field with him, it is a real treat. And that's going to be on Wednesday, March 30th. So check Better Impact for all of the details. So, I don't know any kids that grow up and say, I'm going to be a botanist when I grow up. And so I've asked Steve to just take a couple of moments and tell us what drew him to this field, kind of where he got his formal training, and where he spent his time before we were lucky enough to have him join us at the Conservancy. So welcome, Steve, and I'll let you take it away.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I got into botany after I went to school at Arizona State University to study agriculture, and discovered that I have a black thumb. So instead of agriculture, I switched over to taxonomy, to plant, just botany in general, and interested mostly in the nomenclature, classification, identification of plants is kind of the way I went. I actually started that fairly late. I was about in my mid-20s, and was living in eastern Oklahoma at the time. I had lived here previous to that, from 1968 on. But back in the early 80s, I started at the University of Arkansas over in Fayetteville. I commuted across state line. And after a couple of years of that, moved back here to Arizona. Finished up at Arizona State University with a BS, I like to say appropriately enough, in botany, and focusing on systematics, plant systematics. So with that, we'll get right into the screen here, and let's see, share screen is around here somewhere. There it is. That's the one we want to share. Is that working for everybody?
Yes, we want to create it, take it to slideshow.
There you go.
There we go. That's perfect.
Okay. All right, we'll start there. So the question we ask every winter is, what's the spring going to bring? And this year, not so much. We'll get into that. First thing we want to do is identify what a wildflower is. There's really no hard and fast definition beyond just being wild, not cultivated. You can cultivate wildflowers, of course, but at that point they're tame, not wild anymore. Would you consider annuals wildflowers, perennials, both? It's up to it's up to you to choose. Really, there are wildflowers, things we call wildflowers, that are obviously annuals, and there are some that are perennials. So we have both, but I think it basically boils down to: does it have a pretty flower? Does it have an attractive flower? And most of them do. Most of the things we look at, there are a lot of spring flowering annuals, not necessarily wildflowers. Just they flower in the spring ephemerals. There's a long list of them, including a lot of them without attractive wildflowers. Annual grasses, of course, red brome, which is non-native, Mediterranean grass, both of those are non-native. They're not pretty flowers. I'll put it that way. There's some other non-natives like fillory, cheeseweed, stinknet. They have flowers, very small in the case of cheeseweed, but not wildflowers. No, they're wild. They're flower. Well, they're not really wild. They're feral, I guess. At any rate, we also have some non-natives like natives. I'm sorry, like mustards and cryptants that are, in fact, spring flowering annuals, but they're not really considered wildflowers because the flowers are so small that we really don't think of them as wildflowers. Here's fillory and cheeseweed and stinknet, the three I mentioned there. They're both the first two, the fillory and the cheeseweed, are pretty much naturalized. They've been here long enough that they're naturalized. The chamomile, the desert, what do they call it? Some globe chamomile. That's right. Stinknet is another name for it. That's fairly recent arrival. It was first collected in Arizona, I think, in 2002. So it's only been here about 20 years, but it's spreading pretty wildly. We've got some obvious perennial flowers that we would consider wildflowers: ocotillo, brittlebush, globe mallow, things like that come back every year. So they're obviously perennials. They flower once a year, sometimes twice. In the case of some of them will respond to winter rains too. Not that many, not these, I think, very much, but some do. Not so obvious flowering perennials are things like blue dix, which spends most of the year as a corm, as an underground storage tissue, like a bulb. And 11 months of the year it's underground, so you don't see it. And we have fleabane. It's a pretty common plant in the preserve that has got white flowers, mostly flowering in the morning. Desert marigold is quite common, mostly in disturbed areas, but anywhere else too, you'll see desert marigold. We have some very cryptic spring flowering perennials. I'll mention a little bit here. Mistletoe on the left there. Those are, believe it or not, all of these have male and female flowers, male and female plants in the case of mistletoe and jojoba. The upper flowers are the female flowers. You can see a little orange stigma maybe in that mistletoe, and then in the lower flowers of the mistletoe, you'll see little anthers, little yellow anthers. The bursage is wind pollinated, so it produces prodigious amounts of pollen that just get blown and hopefully catch on to the stigma of a female flower in the case of bursages. And the same with jojoba, whereas bursage is monoecious, meaning male and female flowers on the same plant. We have dioecious male and female flowers on different plants in the case of mistletoe and jojoba. On the top on the right there, you see the jojoba flowers have three little stigmas that stick out. That's the whole flower, pretty much. In the pollen, the anthers shed, again, prodigious amounts of pollen, and just hope the wind carries it and it gets a chance to stick to one of those stigmas. So there's some climatic factors that come into play when we're looking at what's going to constitute a good wildflower season. There must be a good germinating rain previous autumn, sometime between October and December. About an inch of rain is what we really need to induce good germination. This year, our germinating rain came kind of late. We had one in October that didn't really do much, but by December, I think it was December 8th, we had a good rain here, about 8/10 of an inch. And sorry about the phone. So it got a late start. And then we didn't have what was also needed there. The third point there is following rains. We need another inch of rain, about an inch a month, to maintain the growth through that season. We didn't have that this year, obviously. I just spent a couple of days on my knees looking at very tiny plants. They're all very, very small this year. See here. Then we've got some edaphic factors. We've got soil chemistry can play a role. Soil texture. We have basically two types of soils in the preserve. The mountain range has metamorphic material breaking down, and then the northern preserve is all that pinnacle peak pediment with coarse grain soils that absorb a lot of water, and give it up fairly readily. The soil chemistry that's involved here. I was going to mention carbonate soils here. That if you see a place like this, like the photograph here with a lot of creosote bush or Kenosha or both, that's going to be an area with carbonate soils. It's going to have some caliche in there, some white material in there. There's one wildflower we'll talk about that favors that kind of soil. We'll get into that. Soil seed bank, of course, has a great deal of factor. Some seed has got to get to that point, get to that place, start growing, start making seed and spreading, thus filling up the seed bank, so that there's plenty of seed in a particular area. So, when you see some place that looks like it'd be a great place for poppies to be and they're not there, it's just because the seed didn't get there. That's pretty much all it is. Back in 2018, if you all remember, if you were here in 2018, October, we had 5 inches of rain, which really, basically, as I put it, emptied the seed bank. Everything that was going to sprout, every seed that was going to sprout did. The good news is that they all did fairly well. We had a good good set of following rains, and so they were able to produce a lot of seed and build up that seed bank again to levels that it wasn't at before the October rains there. So that really did add to the soil seed bank. Really did increase the number of seeds that were available in the soil seed bank. That's slowly getting emptied over time there. This year, of course, we emptied it a little bit. No, not building up back very much. So we'll deal with some of the common wildflowers here, the things people most like and most consider wildflowers and see mostly. We've got Mexican poppy, as distinct from its relative. This is very, very common in the preserve. That photo is from the preserve. I'm not sure where though. We also have California poppy, but not many. You don't see it very often. It's literally a California variety, or subspecies, I should say. You'll find it in California. It's over there. It can be short-lived perennials. Here, our variety, Mexican poppy, is strictly annual. It doesn't continue on for not following season. Excuse me. This picture on the right there is from Bartlett Lake. If you've ever been out there and seen the wonderful wildflower displays, well, there's a reason for that. It's the Forest Service hydromulches that area. They go out and spray seed to increase the tourist value out there. So if you're ever out there and you see poppies, you're probably looking at the California variety. You'll see the white flowers on the left there. They have a little more variation in flower color than our natives. The natives don't really have as much variation. The way to tell them apart, if you're in the field, if you look at that little bract below, that little rim below the fruit on the right there, just about dead center, and then again the lower right, you'll see these little rims there, and that's how you can tell. If it's a very narrow rim, it's our Mexican poppy. If it's got a very wide rim, like on the right there, that's the California subspecies. Lupins, we've got a couple of species of lupins here in the preserve, and they often will grow with poppies, where the Mojave lupins there and the poppies grow. That makes Michigan football fans happy, I think, those colors. They're kind of pets. So the common one, the Mojave lupin, is the one we see most often. It's got a blue corolla. It's a taller flower stalk. The leaflets are narrow if you look at the lower part of the frame there. Bajada lupin is something you generally see in washes or disturbed soils, really gravelly soils. They like a really gravelly soil. Smaller plant, very fuzzy. Look at the fuzz on those leaves. And the flower stalk doesn't get very tall. It's only an inch or two tall there. It does not need insects to pollinate itself. It's self-pollinating, so it doesn't really need to produce a flower or a big flower stalk for insects to visit. So it's a smaller plant, but quite noticeable in its difference. Wider leaflets, pink corolla, things like that. Now the insect visiting lupin there, the one that does get visited by insects, has an interesting feature that is a kind of a hint to visiting insects. If you see the flower, it's got a yellow center, but around the outside of that, there's a white patch. And then if you look on the flowers down low, it's turned red. What happens is a bee will land on that flower, and the little tarsi, the little fingernails, as it were, on the end of their legs, will tear the corolla, and that releases ethylene gas, which makes that white spot change to red, giving a signal to visiting bees that it's already been hit. If it's red, it's already been visited. Go to the white flower, the white-centered flower. Similar flowers we have two species of Phacelia in the preserve, distant Phacelia, and I have no idea where that name comes from. It's very common in the preserve. It's the most common of the two Phacelias here. It's got short filaments. The filament is the part in the flower that holds the anther. If you look at the one on the right there, it's got longer filaments. They're dark, and the anthers at the end are yellow in the case of the notchleaf Phacelia, whereas they're white or blue in the common distant Phacelia. Desert chicory. We have two species, one more common than the other. The most common one is New Mexico plume seed, which is a little bit larger flower. It flowers earlier in the year, flowers between March and April. That's the one we're seeing now. Common in the metro area, throughout the preserve too. It's got short filaries. The filary is that green part just above my thumb there that kind of hold the flower in a little cup shape. And if you look at the California chicory, which, as I said, is later flowering, generally found at higher elevations, those filaries almost reach the ends of the ligules, the ends of the ray petals on the flower there. That's one way you can tell them apart, is the relative length of the filaries to the ligules. Bladderpods. I mentioned there was a plant that likes calcareous soils, and this is it. This is one you generally see. When you see it, you're going to look around, you see kind of white caliche soil with it in association with it. We have two species, mostly in the mountain range there. We're going to see the one with bare fruit. There are no hairs on the fruit on Gordon's bladderpod, but Moapa bladderpod on the right there, you can see these little tiny hairs flat to the fruit. They're star-shaped though. If you looked at them really close under the microscope, you can see there's a star-shaped hairs. Next, we have gilias. We have two species. They do hybridize a little bit. I've seen some intermediates in the cases of these guys. So we have star gilia on the left and lesser yellow-throated gilia on the right. I'll put the screen up with those names there. The corolla on the most common one is Gilia flavicincta, the yellow-throated one. You're going to see that most often. Pink-purple corolla, long, narrow yellow throat there. You can see the yellow throat even from the outside. It's even more intense if you look inside, though. Their filaries are either hairless or have some cobwebby material on them. However, in this case, there are some little glandular hairs on that one, which I think is reflective of the fact that they do hybridize with the one on the right, Stargilia. You'll notice those glandular hairs on the calyx on the one on the right there are pretty intense. They're pretty visible there. That's one way you can tell them from the lesser yellow throat. It's got a white or pale blue corolla and a shorter yellow throat, a little wider. And then it's got all those sticky hairs on it. Those sticky hairs just kind of help protect it from, help protect it from fruit and seed predators that come and wouldn't, either eat or lay an egg on it. It's sticky material that just kind of protects it from insects. We have 2 larkspurs in the preserve. I've seen intermixed populations of them, but I haven't seen any hybridization going on in them. Pale-faced larkspurs, most common one, I think. It's got that light-colored corolla, lavender. It's got leaves on the flower stalk. The flower stalk itself will have leaves on it. One way to tell the bare stem larkspur is obviously it doesn't have leaves on the stem on that flower stalk. So that's another way to tell them apart. Besides that dark blue color, that's a good indicator. We have anemone coming along here, tuber anemone, Anemone tuberosa for you Latin fans. It's it's the same family as the delphiniums, previous flowers there. You can see though the flowers are really strange there. They call that zygomorphic in the for the $5 word is zygomorphic, meaning it's not a regular flower, meaning it doesn't have like 5 petals that are all even around it. This one has an actinomorphic, the opposite condition, where it's just if you look at it from above, it's symmetrical all the way around. They flower very quickly. The petals drop off fairly quickly. The leaves on the stem on the right, though, those aren't really leaves. Those are actually bracts. Those are part of the flower, if you can believe it. But it's true that they're a little bit different from the leaves, but that is actually part of the flower. And now this is an interesting one. We don't see the yellow one on the right there very much in the preserve. That's a separate variety. The orange one is the one we see up at, let me see, where do we see that? I've seen it, I can't remember if I've seen it in Bell Pass. I know I've seen it in Tom's Thumb Trail. So it seems to be up there. Yeah, Lookout Point, that area. You see a lot of it up there. I have not seen the yellow in the preserve. There is a population if you like to go out to Mount Humboldt. If you take the Cape Freak Road all the way out and go up to that big golf ball on top of Humboldt Mountain there's a road going up there. Been paved recently, which is nice because I think the previous paving was sometime in the Eisenhower administration, and it was pretty bad for a while there. But 4 or 5 years ago, they did repave that road. And up there's a mixed population. You can even see some hybridization going on, some crossing between these two, some intermediates. So it's subtle, but not many, but definitely present. So those are some of that's my favorite flower. I think somebody asked me recently what my favorite wildflower was. I have to answer that. They're very, very gorgeous. And there's some other Mariposa lily type plants up there too, some other Calochorda species up in the Humboldt area. But keep your eye. If you can find a yellow one in the preserve, we ought to hand out a prize for that if we can find one. Don't know if it's going to be a very good year for them this year because of the lack of rain, but we'll see. April, I think early April is when you're going to see these guys flower. And I think that was pretty much it. I went through it faster than I thought I was going to.
So thanks very much, Steve. That was awesome. And I think I see a lot of flowers that I thought I knew what they were this morning that I really didn't know what they were. But we have a few questions for you. One is, I had heard that globe mallow was not native to this area. Is that true or false?
That's false. It is a native.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's good. And Janine wanted to know, why is it that poppies and lupine seem to always grow in the same spot?
That's a good question. I guess there must be some edaphic factor, some factor of the soil condition that is shared by both species. I really don't know why. Either that or, like I said, it's Michigan football fans going out scattering seeds. And also, I think that that's coincidental. I think they just happen to have good, similar growing conditions. So and that's a guess.
You can take down stop sharing your screen if you want to.
That'll work. Yeah. Oops, no share. No, I don't want to do that either. I want to just quit.
Don't
We'll
quit
go back to
yourself.
that.
We want to
And
still see
we'll,
you. You can just stop sharing and then we'll be able to see.
there's the stop share. All right.
There
Now
we
we're
are.
good.
There we are. Elba had a question. Are Coulter lupine the same as Mojave?
Yes. Yes, that's right. Coulter's lupin is another common name for the same thing.
Okay, that's great. And Dan, Dan let us know that your favorite flower, the Mariposa lily, there's a lot of them up on Sunrise.
Yes, that's another good place one I'd forgotten about. Yep.
Here's another question. Why do some Ocotillo bloom before they leaf?
Well, the leafing is independent of the flowering. The flowering is, it's spring flowering, and but it will leaf out in response to rainfall, and they will leaf out as many as 6 times a year. They can
Yes.
produce a set of leaves, drop it, produce another set of leaves with another set of rain, and go on. So sometimes if there's no rain, they will go ahead and still flower in their regular time, their regular springtime flowering season, and occasionally out of season, but not often.
Interesting.
And the leafing is independent. That's why.
Are there other ones like that? Are there any other plants out there like that?
Let me see. Nothing that pops up off the top of my head.
Okay, Michael and Ruth wanted to know what trailheads or trails would you recommend for wildflower viewing for visitors?
Well, the reports I've been getting,
especially elderly visitors. So they must be someone
yeah.
coming that's not a real hiker.
Right. Gosh, the Granite Mountain area, I understand. I haven't been there this year yet, but in the past it has been spectacular, and I hear it's very good this year. And I don't know if we can get the wildflower hike changed to that, but we'll have to look into that. That would be a good place to go. Let me see, Sunrise Trail itself. That's a long trail and uphill, so that's not good for elderly visitors. Gosh.
I know sometimes Jane Rao will have.
Yeah, Jane Rao, I was going to pitch in there.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Yeah, if anybody has some ideas, some of the people have been hiking out there and seeing them, let us know in the comments.
Well, here, Marsha.
Somebody just did. Yeah, Marsha did.
Marsha Lip said there's tons of them on Jane Rao, so that's good.
Okay. Yeah, that's the best.
Carrie said he's seen what looks like 2 variations of Mormon tea, one with flowers and one without, in a stronger green. Are there are those male and female plants?
Yes, they are. Yes, the male are the ones that stand out, the yellow flowers, the yellow orange, I guess you could say. And if you look closely at the ones that are just green, you'll see little tiny cones. These guys are gymnosperms. They're more closely related to pine trees than anything else around here. So those are cones rather than, that's the kind of fruit they are, is a cone. So yeah, if you look close at those green ones, you'll see flowers there, but they're less distinct because again, it's wind pollinated. They don't need petals to attract insects.
I see. That's interesting. I didn't know that. So Lisa wants to know how do you determine a good wildflower season? She's heard that this is not a good wildflower season, although that wasn't my experience this morning. So what do we use to determine a good wildflower season?
I think it's pretty much rainfall dependent. If we get that good germinating rain in the fall, particularly October, it seems to be the prime season. And then regular, 1 inch a month, maybe, a half inch every couple of weeks, we'll just carry things on and keep them growing and result in good flowering. You'll notice if you see these small plants, they're small, but they're flowering. They're still putting out, flowers and making seed. They're just having to do it in rather desperate straits with limited resources due to the lack of rainfall.
That's great. So, what did Elba say? She has wildflowers in her yard. Should she pull them up when they're finished blooming or just deadhead them? Are there some varieties that rebloom when you deadhead them?
Honestly, I don't know. That's why I switched over to botany from agriculture. I'm not that good at growing them.
Okay, that's good. Well,
I wish I could say. I can't really, I don't have a suggestion there.
This has been great. Anyone else have any questions? You can unmute yourself and just ask them at this point. No, it looks like that's it, Steve. This was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Steve,
Got one.
sorry, this is Elba.
Yeah.
I heard your reaction to my pull them up.
Well, I wouldn't discard them. I would, let the seed.
Yeah.
If you want them again next year, then leave the seed.
Yeah, and I typically do allow them to reseed, and I also collect some seeds.
Mhm.
What I've done in the past is things that are more annual, like the lupines and poppies. I usually will pull them up just because they die and they don't look great. And then things like the desert marigolds, the brittle bush, and the globe mallow, I leave it alone, or I might trim it back a little bit and kind of trim off the dead heads. And that's been my experience. I know sunflowers, like, roses, you deadhead them, they bloom more. I didn't know if like lupine were like that, because if they were, that would be great, because mine have all gone to seed already.
Yeah.
They had a very short bloom period this year.
Yeah. No, I think you're gonna have to wait till next year. They won't really come back. They tend to, flower and die and get those seeds back into the ground as quickly as they can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Right, thanks.
Thanks. So thank you everyone for being here. Steve, thank you for a great presentation. Everybody get out on the trails. There's wonderful stuff going on out there. Just to let you know, our next Lunch and Learn is going to be Thursday, April 14th, featuring our very own equestrian steward, Jenny Powers, who's going to talk about the nature of the beast, horseback riding in the preserve. And just the few conversations I've had with her, I know I've learned a lot, and I know you will too. So thanks so much for being here, and hope we see you on the 14th. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
You bet.